Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I have an exclusive leaked prototype of the Apple Reality Pro headset. Unfortunately, you might realize our regular host Edison is not with us today, but due to legal reasons I cannot disclose his whereabouts. Just kidding, it's a virtual boy, really nothing special. For a retro gaming channel, actually we've got a lot to say about the fait accompli of Apple entering the XR space. We have thoughts, since VR is old hat, retro futuristic even. Exhibit 1, we've dusted off these old machines. We have Sony, we have the Oculus, we have the Pico, and maybe we can get some clarity by looking back at where we're headed through the past. So today on Happy Gaming House, what VR's past can tell us about life, the future, and Apple's rumored, depending on when you're listening to this, Reality Pro. What is art? Yeah, I'm sitting here and that's the task I've given myself. What is art? Games are art. And that's a boring conversation. It's been done, and sadly done some more. Let's wave our hand and say definitions of art tend to involve aesthetic engagement. Aesthetics from the Greek aesthetikos, meaning related to sense experience. Whatever it is, we experience art. Plato and Aristotle spoke of mimesis, that all art in some way is an imitation of reality. We can argue over that, but what greater realization of mimesis is there than honest to goodness virtual reality? Art engages our emotions, our appreciation, our contemplation, and crucially, our suspension of disbelief. Video games push this further, adding interaction. Crude sets of rules become complex simulations, become new worlds, become virtual realities. But long term at least, it's rumored Apple has a different vision in store, something a little harder to demonstrate with current tech. Many of the specs of the so-called Reality Pro have apparently leaked, as have internal debates indicating much ambivalence over the product. See, it's said Apple favors mixed reality at shorter bursts, less the snow crash or Ready Player One paradigm we're used to. Think of it this way. If VR is Pico 4 and augmented reality is Pokemon Go, the HoloLens, or Google Glass, the so-called Reality Pro could signal the first step in a more wholesale integration of the virtual and physical worlds. And it's not marketing. Mixed reality is less slippery and nebulous than the metaverse. The metaverse is kind of encapsulated by VR chat, which I think is cooler than is generally given credit. But anyway, mixed reality tells us something important about Apple's likely trajectory in this product category. To help us understand, here's a question. Is the Virtual Boy even virtual reality? The thing is table mounted. Twin LED oscillating mirrors create a fixed stereoscopic 3D effect. It's less a VR headset than an interactive Viewmaster. My BS answer is all art is mimesis. So to the degree in which it immerses you, all art is VR, and so is the Virtual Boy. The presence you feel from modern VR sets use the same visual immersion tactics, just the Virtual Boy does this with less mimesis. No head tracking, eye tracking, movement, etc. Is that why it failed? Is there some combination of these features which takes us over some indefinable threshold? Processing power, the kind of tracking, some X factor? Moreover, what is the threshold between VR and AR, between AR and mixed reality? The points on this continuum are porous. For the Reality Pro discussion, I'll stick to the most solid info out there, what sources tend to agree on. Granted, take it all with a grain of salt, at least until the maybe June 6th announcement. Analysts seem unanimous this would be one pricey sucker. Parts cost projections vary, but we're looking at a floor of 2,000 USD. I'm reading closer to 3,000, depending on how willing Apple is to depress the price to stoke demand. This is no iPhone, and to begin with, it is no tier 2 Apple Watch level product either. Internal sales targets for the first year seem to be more on the order of a few 100,000 to a few million units. This is one for the developers, enterprise, and die-hard early adopters. But even at this price point, there seems to be some unease internally about whether this product is right for Apple or ready for the prime time. Appetite might be stronger for the long-rumored Apple Glass, which does away with the bulky headset for something seamless as a pair of glasses. This has been the holy grail since Stanley G. Weinbaum's 1935 tale Pygmalion spectacles, widely credited as the first fully realized depiction of VR, but the underlying tech has proved challenging, as Google can attest. There is much talk of a 2025 announcement for whatever that's worth. All of this leaves the Reality Pro as an expensive stopgap, in a sense. Apple Insider compared it to Apple saying to developers, go pretend these are glasses and develop software for the AR glasses we'll be delivering in a few years. Harsh. Whatever the case, it certainly signals a transition away from an industry long dominated by Oculus-style headsets towards a sleeker design, if the leaks are true, and more orientated to the outside world. Some of this began with the Quest Pro and color pass-through, Hello 2, Pico 4, but these had severe limitations, feeling rather flat. It's not believable at all. These look like massive monster hands. Let's do some Duolingo. I mean, now it's too big. See, it doesn't have this illusion of distance correctly. So I expected much better integration here. Eye and face tracking, hand tracking, voice control. Possibly no controllers. It's Apple, so hopefully it should just work. The Reality Pro is presumably powered by two M2 chips. We're talking MacBook power here, only double. 2800 pixel per inch micro OLED displays for at least 4K, maybe 8K equivalent resolution. It will run Reality OS and maybe have LiDAR and something like 12 tracking cameras, but maybe not. Also, it will support foveated VR, which uses eye tracking dynamically to control the resolution around where your vision is focusing, saving on process power. Battery life is in the order of 2 hours, and strangely, you might have to wear a battery pack. But what will all this mean from the user standpoint? Even if it's a flop, it's possible the Reality Pro will be as epochal to VR as it moves to XR as the original Quest or first consumer VR experiments in the 90s were. A third wave. All that is new is old. So to understand, let's detour into historical techniques of visual immersion in art and history for just a sec. Video games simulate how a virtual world should behave and react to your input. The rest of the equation is visual immersion. Artists learnt to draw in perspective and create the illusion of 3D on a 2D plane. Some went further with optical illusions like this anamorphic 3D skull in Hans Holbein the Younger's 1533 painting, The Ambassadors. Such trompe l'oeil in art, literally tricking the eye, is exactly what we do today to achieve the 3D effect of VR headsets. Art has been at it for centuries. Think field of view. In 1798, the painter Robert Barker spoke of la nature à la coup d'œil, nature at a glance, describing the idea of 360-degree panoramic images in which observers, in whatever situation the painter may wish, they should imagine themselves, feel as if they were really on that very spot. Panoramas went on to become a full-blown global craze by the 19th century, with revolving cyclorama rooms, special lighting and props enhancing immersion. The experience is enough to cause a feeling of seasickness or dizziness, just like modern VR. The Virtual Boy is stereoscopic technology where two images are placed apart to create the illusion of three-dimensionality, dates back to 1832 and Sir Charles Wheatstone's stereoscope. So the Virtual Boy is simply an advanced stereoscope? Go Nintendo. Anyway, by 1851, stereoscope mania had taken hold. For early head-mounted displays, we have the Sensorama, Morton Heilig's 1962 head-mounted stereoscopic 3D TV display. A stereoscope, but for video. Around this time too, philosophers were becoming more concerned with media culture and the impact of screens. Guy Debord's 1967 work, The Society of Spectacle, warns that everything that was directly lived has moved away into representation. Jean Baudrillard's pioneering 1981 book, Simulacra and Simulation, is the most eerily precedent. While not mentioning VR directly, virtual reality wasn't coined until 1987 by VPL's Jaron Lanier, it argues we are living in a world where the distinction between the real and the simulated has become blurred. And in such a world dominated by simulations, reality becomes increasingly irrelevant. While social commentary, this blurred reality idea is key and is much closer to the mixed reality we are headed for with Apple than the simple visual immersion of early art and VR. Also, John Carpenter's 1988 film, They Live, with fictional sunglasses with reality-enhancing properties. Reality Pro, indeed. Commercial VR began in the late 80s and early 90s with VPL research in 1984, contributing to NASA's Virtual Interface Environment Workstation or VIEW system, which even made use of haptic gloves. Power Glove! Virtuality brought VR to arcades in the early 90s, and VR gaming was born. In the 90s, VR had reached cultural saturation point. The question was, who would bring VR to the living room first? Within this zeitgeist, Neil Stephenson came up with the metaverse for his 1992 novel, Snow Crash, just as Sega cancelled their VR plans at the 11th hour, likely due to reports of sickness and potential liability for injuries while playing in VR. The Sega headset included head tracking and was a lot closer to the VR of today, whereas the actually released Virtual Boy failed to impress, not being the type of VR people expected or maybe wanted. This expectation gap contributed to the bursting of the VR bubble and an almost 20-year dark period until Palmer Luckey and the Oculus. The next question becomes whether the Reality Pro can be mixed reality people want, or is there another expectation gap that could sink the industry again? There is a lot riding on the reception of the Reality Pro to legitimize XR's foothold in the future of tech. So more than specs, perceptions and experience are everything. Early indications are positive, with Palmer Luckey seemingly given the nod of approval. A lot will come down to comfort, ease of use, and other intangibles. How much mixed reality feels like mixed reality? That is hard to quantify. But here's the pitch. A standalone headset. No cords, no PC, no external tracking, but packing PC VR power. Accurate hand tracking right out of the box. Enough to type. It will be able to track your eyes, expressions, and movement. And with FBT, full body tracking, getting cheaper and easier by the day, expect support or a first-party solution for that sometime. AI features must be on the cards now too. An AI personal assistant in virtual reality could be the ultimate productivity tool. The extra power will fuel more tools like Dreams VR or Quill, allowing for professional filmmaking, 3D modeling, animation, and even game creation in standalone VR. This is a tool for professionals, much like the iPad Pro. Virtual offices and workspaces won't have to look terrible and have that soulless, much ridiculed meta aesthetic. But can Apple make it frictionless? Something you want to spend time using? We'll have to wait for the announcement and maybe September release, or this could all be nonsense. But however it happens, we only seem to be inching closer to the Pygmalion spectacles dreamed of in 1935.